The silver spoon hit the crystal flute like a gunshot, and for one perfect moment, the thorn vein wedding held its breath. Then a child's sob tore through the garden like something breaking that couldn't be fixed. A boy stood alone beneath the floral arch, his white button-down wrinkled and wet with tears, clutching a crumpled photograph in both fists. "She's not waking up," he cried. "My mommy won't wake up." Every head turned. No one moved. Guests in silk and champagne exchanged glances over their glasses. Women stepped forward, then retreated when the crying sharpened into something rawer, something that made comfortable people uncomfortable in a way they didn't know how to solve. 300 people in tailored elegance, and not one of them knew what to do with a terrified 5-year-old boy. But one man did. Alaric Thorne set down his glass and walked straight toward the child while every other person in that garden stepped back. 2 men followed 3 paces behind him. The groom's father went pale. Everyone at that wedding knew the name Thorne. Most of them had reasons to. He dropped to one knee. His 6 feet 3 inches frame folded down to the boy's eye level. His second, Barrett, went rigid beside him. In 4 years, he had never once seen Alaric Thorne kneel for anyone. "My name is Alaric. What's yours?" "Luca." The boy's voice cracked on the single syllable. "My mommy was taking pictures by the cars. She said she'd be right back. I counted to 100. I counted 3 times. Alaric's jaw tightened. Something cold and old settled in his chest, a memory he had spent 15 years burying. A boy standing in a hospital hallway, counting the tiles on the floor, waiting for a name to be called that never came. "We're going to find her," he said. Not gently. Not with the softened voice people use on children to make promises they aren't sure they can keep. With certainty. The only language Alaric Thorne had ever spoken fluently. "I promise you." Luca wrapped both arms around his neck and held on. Behind them, the string quartet resumed. The bride laughed at something. Champagne was poured. The world kept spinning while this child's world had stopped. Then Barrett's voice came low and tight at his ear. "Boss. Parking lot. She's down." Alaric looked at the boy clinging to his shoulder, at the photograph still crumpled in his small fist, a woman's face, circled in red ink the way a child circles something precious he's afraid to lose. And the most feared man in that garden made a decision that would cost him everything he thought he was. Alaric carried Luca across the garden the same way he moved through every room he'd ever entered, without slowing, without looking back. The boy's arms stayed locked around his neck. His face was pressed into the shoulder of Alaric's suit jacket, tears and breath soaking through the fabric, his small body shuddering with the particular violence of a child who has been crying so long the sobs have turned involuntary, like hiccups. Like the body crying on behalf of someone too exhausted to continue. Barrett walked beside them. Close, silent, the way he always walked, a half step back, eyes everywhere at once. "Tell me exactly what happened," Alaric said. Not loudly. His voice stayed low, the way it did in rooms where important things were being decided. "From the beginning." Luca pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes were swollen, lashes dark and wet, the photograph still crumpled against Alaric's collar where he hadn't loosened his grip even slightly. "We came in the big car," Luca said, his voice uneven, catching on every third word. "Mommy had her camera. She always has her camera." He paused to swallow. "She was taking pictures of the flowers by the entrance and then she said she needed the other lens. From the bag. In the car." "Okay." She said, his chin trembled. "She said don't move, baby, I'll be 2 minutes. A breath. She does the voices when she reads me stories. The bear sounds grumpy and the dragon sounds funny. He said it the way children say things that are true and important but not yet connected to the larger truth they're circling. She always comes back fast." "How long ago?" "I counted to 100. Luca's brow furrowed, the way a child's does when they're applying serious effort to something. 3 times. And then I counted again but I lost the number because I was crying. Alaric said nothing. He adjusted his hold on the boy and kept walking. The photograph shifted, and Alaric caught a clearer look at it. A woman in her mid-20s, dark hair, a composed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The kind of smile that had learned to perform calm for someone else's benefit. He recognized that smile the way you recognize a language you grew up hearing without ever being formally taught. Is she sick? Alaric asked quietly. Luca was quiet for a moment. She gets tired, he said carefully, the way children speak when they're repeating something they've overheard adults say. She says it's just tired. But she holds the wall sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking. The parking lot appeared ahead. Ambulance lights already cutting red and blue across the asphalt. Alaric saw her before Luca could. He shifted the boy's face gently back into his shoulder. I've got you, he said. Don't look yet. She was on the ground between two parked cars, one arm folded beneath her, the other stretched out across the asphalt as though she had reached for something on the way down and missed. Alaric handed Luca to Barrett without a word. The boy startled at the transfer, gripped Barrett's jacket, and then saw his mother and went absolutely still in the way children do when fear becomes something larger than crying can contain. Don't put him down, Alaric said quietly, and walked forward. He crouched beside her. Willow Hayes was 26 years old according to the vendor badge clipped to her camera bag, which lay beside her on the ground, strap still across her chest, lens cap still on. She hadn't made it as far as the car. She'd gone down here, in the gravel, between strangers' vehicles, where no one would have found her until the reception ended and the lot emptied. What stopped Alaric's breath wasn't the fall. It was what the fall revealed. Her dress had shifted at the shoulder. The bone beneath pressed against the fabric like a knuckle against a glove. Her wrist, resting against the asphalt, was the width of something that should not belong to a grown woman. Her face, even unconscious, even slack, held the hollowed architecture of someone who had been quietly disappearing for a very long time. The paramedics arrived and worked around him. He didn't move until one asked him to, and even then he only stepped back far enough to watch. At the hospital, they gave Willow a private room on the 4th floor. Alaric had said 2 words to Barrett, who had shown a card to the right person, and the machinery of his name had done the rest. The heart monitor beside her bed kept a steady, fragile rhythm. Luca sat in the chair pulled close to her side, both hands wrapped around hers, his chin resting on the mattress edge, watching her breathe as though if he looked away she might stop. The attending physician, a spare woman in her 50s named Dr. Solis, found Alaric in the corridor and spoke without preamble. For days, she said. Alaric looked at her. She hasn't eaten in 4 days. Possibly longer before that, but 4 days of nothing. Dr. Solis held her clipboard with both hands, her voice level, clinical, and somehow worse for it. Severe anemia. Acute malnutrition. Her body didn't collapse today, Mr. Thorne. It has been collapsing for months. Today was simply the last morning it managed to stand up. Why 4 days? The doctor glanced through the glass at Luca, still holding his mother's hand. The boy has a heart condition. The new medication cycle started 5 days ago. She paused. The prescription cost what her grocery budget cost. She made a choice. Alaric said nothing. He looked through the glass at a 5-year-old boy with pink cheeks and neatly combed hair, kept carefully, loved completely, by a woman who had been quietly trading her life for his. His jaw tightened until the muscle at his temple stood out like a wire pulled taut. She'll have whatever she needs, he said. Starting now. She woke to the sound of birds. That was the first wrong thing. Her apartment in Glendale sat above a laundromat on a street where the ambient noise was delivery trucks and the particular argument her upstairs neighbor had with his television every morning. There were no birds. Willow opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was high and cream-colored, crossed with pale wooden beams. Morning light came through curtains she didn't own, falling across a bed that was wider than her entire bedroom at home. And 4 line ran from her left wrist to a stand beside the bed. A woman in scrubs sat in the corner chair, noticed her eyes open, and stood. Don't try to sit up yet, the nurse said. Not unkindly. Your blood pressure is still low. Where's my son? He's safe. He's having breakfast downstairs. Willow sat up anyway. The room tilted, and she gripped the mattress with both hands and breathed through it, waiting for the world to stop moving. When it steadied, she looked around the room properly, the quality of the furniture, the absence of anything ordinary, the way even the air felt different, filtered and still, the way air felt in places that cost more per night than she made in a month. Then she remembered the parking lot. The gravel against her cheek. Reaching for something she couldn't hold. And she remembered the man who had carried her son. The nurse confirmed what Willow's instincts had already assembled. She was in the private medical wing of the Thorne estate, 40 minutes outside the city. She had been unconscious for 19 hours. The doctor would come at 10. Mr. Thorne had left instructions that she was to have whatever she needed. Willow sat with that sentence for a long moment. She knew the name Thorne the way most people knew it, through the particular silence that followed it in conversation. Through the way certain men in expensive suits used it as a full stop, a period at the end of an argument. She had photographed 3 charity galas in the past 2 years and heard it spoken at all of them, always at a careful distance, always with a slight adjustment of posture, the way people unconsciously straighten up near something that could hurt them. She had no money. No car. Luca's medication was here, she'd been told, filled and waiting. His cardiologist appointment, rescheduled twice because she couldn't cover the copay, had been confirmed for Thursday at a clinic 40 minutes away. Someone had done that overnight. Made calls, pulled records, arranged things. While she was unconscious. The door opened and Luca came through it at a run, still in yesterday's clothes, a piece of toast in one hand, and the relief on his face when he saw her sitting up split something open in her chest. She held him for a long time. Over his shoulder, through the tall window, she could see the ground stretching outward, manicured, vast, enclosed by a wall she couldn't see the end of. Beautiful, she thought. And completely impossible to leave. He presented it as a business arrangement, which she appreciated more than she would have appreciated kindness. 3 days after she woke up in the estate, Alaric came to the sitting room where she had been given space to work and set a single sheet of paper on the table beside her coffee. A contract. Short, clean, specific. Voss Holdings, she mentally corrected herself, Thorne Holdings, required a photographer for its charitable foundation events. 12 months, fixed monthly salary, health coverage for herself and Luca, hours structured around school pickup. Your portfolio is on your website, he said, when she looked up at him. I reviewed it. When? The night you arrived. She looked back at the contract. It was the same impulse she'd had reading every lease, every payment plan, every document a person in her position learned to read with their guard fully raised, searching the fine print for the trap. She found clean language, fair numbers, and nothing that asked for anything beyond the work itself. She signed it. The first event was a fundraiser for a children's cardiac ward, held in the glass atrium of a downtown hotel. Willow moved through it the way she always moved through events, quietly, almost invisibly, the camera becoming an extension of herself until she stopped being a person in the room and became only an eye. She photographed the donors, the speeches, the handshakes performed for each other's benefit. And then she started noticing other things. Alaric, standing apart from a cluster of board members, crouched briefly beside a boy in a wheelchair near the back of the room, a boy no one else had approached. She caught it in a single frame. His large hand resting carefully on the armrest. His head bent to hear something the boy said. The particular quality of his attention, absolute and unhurried, that she had first seen in a garden when he knelt in the grass for Luca. He didn't know she was shooting. That was the thing about people who had learned to perform for rooms, they knew where cameras were pointed. Alaric knew exactly where the official shots were being taken, and he positioned himself accordingly, giving the lens the controlled version. The closed expression. The authority. He had no idea she had turned the other way. Over the following weeks it became a quiet practice. A pattern neither of them named. She captured him redirecting a server who'd been spoken to rudely by a guest, his voice too low to hear but his meaning unmistakable in the other man's straightened spine. She caught him standing outside after an event in the cold, on the phone, and even from a distance she could read the posture, not a business call, something heavier, something careful. She caught him once sitting alone in the estate garden with Luca's drawings spread across the table, looking at them one by one. She never showed him those photographs. She wasn't sure yet what she was building. But she kept every frame. The restaurant was the kind that didn't have a sign outside. You knew about it because someone who mattered had told you, and if no one who mattered had told you, then you had no business being there. Marcus Flint had been coming here for 6 years, always the same corner booth, always the same scotch, always the same careful performance of a man who believed he was already sitting at the head of a table that still belonged to someone else. Tonight he had company. 2 men. Brothers, by the look of them, with the particular brand of stillness that came not from discipline but from having done enough violence that urgency had simply worn away. They represented the Saran operation out of the Northeast Corridor, a family that had been circling the edges of Thorne territory for 2 years, waiting for a seam to open. Marcus was offering to be the seam. "For months," he said, swirling the glass slowly. "For months since the wedding, and I've watched the most feared man on the eastern seaboard rearrange his schedule around a school pickup." He said it lightly, the way men say things they want to sound like observations but are actually arguments. He moved the Callaway meeting. Twice. Because the boy had a doctor's appointment. The older brother said nothing. He was the kind of man who collected information before spending it. "She's nobody," Marcus continued. "A wedding photographer from Glendale. 3 jobs, eviction notice, a sick kid. The kind of woman you pass on the street and don't see." He paused for effect. "He sees her. That's the problem." "Is it a problem," the younger brother said, "or is it an opportunity?" Marcus smiled. It was a precise smile, calibrated, the kind that didn't reach anything above his cheekbones. "I think those are the same thing right now." What he didn't say, what he had the discipline not to say aloud in a room with men he didn't fully control, was how deep the resentment actually ran. He had given 12 years to Alaric Thorne. 12 years of managing the machinery, absorbing the consequences, doing the work that kept the name clean and the operation intact. And now a woman with a camera and her small sick boy had walked through a wedding garden and undone something in Alaric that Marcus had spent years depending on. The coldness. The distance. The absolute priority of the empire over everything else. That coldness was what made Alaric Thorne untouchable. Without it, he was just a man. And men, Marcus had learned, could be moved. He finished his scotch, set the glass down precisely, and smoothed his jacket. "Give me 60 days, he said. Neither brother answered immediately. The older one looked at the table for a moment, then back up. "Don't waste them." Marcus left first, walking out through the unmarked door into the cold night, already constructing the architecture of what came next. He didn't once consider that someone might already be watching him. Beatrice Vane was 71 years old and moved through the estate as though she had personally approved its construction, which, Willow learned, she very nearly had. She found Willow on a Tuesday afternoon in the garden, shooting the light through the elm trees while Luca was at his afternoon rest. She lowered herself onto the stone bench beside the fountain with the careful economy of someone who had learned not to waste movement, folded her hands in her lap, and watched Willow work for several minutes without speaking. Then she said, "He was 9 when she was born." Willow lowered the camera. Beatrice wasn't looking at her. She was looking at the far wall of the garden, or at something beyond it that only she could see. Her name was Kara. She came early, and their mother never fully recovered from it, which meant Alaric became, by necessity rather than design, the person responsible for making sure Kara ate. That she was warm. That she made it to school. A pause. He was very good at it. Frightening how good, for a child that age. The kind of good that comes from understanding that the alternative is unacceptable. Willow sat down slowly on the other end of the bench. Their neighborhood was the kind where poverty compounds itself, Beatrice continued. Where one bad month becomes 2 becomes a year becomes your entire architecture. Their father worked when he could and disappeared when he couldn't. I knew the family peripherally. I should have done more. She said it without theater, without the performance of guilt. Simply as a fact she had long ago decided to carry honestly. Kara developed a heart condition at 11. Treatable, if you had money. Manageable, if you had access. She stopped. Willow felt the sentence before it arrived. She died at 13. A Tuesday, in February, in a hospital waiting room, because the medication she needed cost more than they had and the systems designed to help them moved too slowly. Beatrice turned and looked at Willow directly for the first time. Her eyes were pale gray and entirely steady. Alaric was 22 by then. He had already become other things. But Kara's death didn't make him cruel. People assume it did. What it made him was certain. Certain that the world ran on power, and that the only protection against what happened to his sister was to have enough of it that no one could ever tell him no again. The garden was quiet around them. Somewhere inside, Willow could hear Luca's television faintly through an open window. He saw your son's chart the night you arrived, Beatrice said. The heart condition. The medication gap. She smoothed her sleeve with one careful hand. He didn't tell you that. Willow looked down at the camera in her hands. She thought about the frames she had been collecting. The ones she hadn't shown anyone. The particular quality of attention Alaric gave Luca, absolute, unhurried, as though the boy's presence required nothing be explained. Now she understood what it actually was. He wasn't watching over Luca. He was watching over Kara. The Hargrove Foundation Gala was the kind of event that existed primarily to be photographed, which meant Willow was invisible inside it, which meant she saw everything. She had learned early in her career that people at formal events operated in two modes, performing for the room, or believing they were unobserved. The space between those two modes was where the true photographs lived. She moved through the ballroom's edges, camera up, watching for the unguarded moments, the real ones that slipped through the careful social choreography like light under a door. She was framing a shot of the string quartet near the east wall when she noticed Marcus. He was moving toward the service corridor, which was unremarkable. Guests and staff used it throughout the evening. What caught her attention was the quality of his movement. Marcus Flint was a man who performed ease the way other people performed work, every gesture calculated to signal belonging and authority. But now he was moving differently. Slightly faster. Shoulders angled inward. The posture of someone trying to take up less space than usual, which on Marcus looked profoundly wrong. She didn't make a decision. Her camera was already at her eye. He stopped near the corridor entrance where a man in catering white stood with a tray of empty glasses. She recognized the catering uniform. She'd been briefed on all the contracted staff before the event. She did not recognize the face. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. Marcus reached for a glass from the tray with one hand, and with the other, palm down, slid something beneath the remaining glasses. The catering man's hand covered it without looking down. A drive. Small, dark, the size of a thumb. The tray moved away. Marcus sipped from the glass and turned back toward the room. Willow's hand was steady. It had always been steady under pressure. 19 months of shooting events on an empty stomach had taught her that the body performed better when the mind stayed quiet. She had 4 frames. She didn't lower the camera immediately, using the quartet as a natural cover, continuing to shoot the musicians for another 30 seconds before drifting left along the wall. She didn't look at the frames until she reached the private workspace near the coat room that the estate staff had arranged for her equipment. The first frame was slightly soft. The second caught the edge of Marcus's hand but not the drive. The third was clean. Sharp enough that she could see the rectangular outline of the device against his palm, the catering man's fingers beginning to close over it, and Marcus's eyes, not on the tray, not on the man, but already scanning the room to confirm he hadn't been seen. The fourth frame showed his face fully. Willow sat with the images for a long time in the small dark room, the noise of the gala muffled behind the door. Then she closed the files, removed the memory card, and put it in her inside jacket pocket, against her ribs. She needed to think before she decided who to trust with this. She waited 2 days. Not from hesitation, from precision. She went back through every frame on the memory card 3 times, cross-referencing the timestamp against the gala's official event schedule, confirming the catering man's face against the contracted staff list Barrett had shared for her credential clearance. He wasn't on it. She wrote down everything she had observed in the order she had observed it, the way she had once learned to document insurance claims after a flood took half their apartment, because documentation was the only language that couldn't be misremembered later. Then she went to find Alaric. He was in the study on the 2nd floor, standing at the window with his back to the door, a phone pressed to his ear. He held up one finger without turning around. She waited. When he finished the call, he set the phone on the desk and looked at her with the expression she had come to recognize as his working face, present, efficient, revealing nothing. "I need to show you something," she said. She set her laptop on the desk and opened the 3rd frame. The clean one. Marcus's hand, the drive, the catering man's fingers closing over it, and Marcus's eyes already scanning the room. Alaric looked at it for a long time without speaking. "The man in the uniform isn't on the contracted staff list," Willow said. "I checked against the clearance document Barrett sent. He wasn't there. And the timestamp puts this at 9:47, during your speech, when the room's attention was fully forward." Silence. "Alaric. I see it." His voice was flat in a way she hadn't heard since the early days at the hospital. He straightened, closed the laptop with one hand, and held it out to her. She didn't take it immediately. "What are you going to do?" "Handle it." "That's not an answer." He looked at her then, directly, and what she saw in his face stopped her next sentence before it formed. It wasn't dismissal. It was the opposite. It was the expression of a man looking at something he needed to move away from quickly, before the distance between them collapsed entirely. "Go back to Luca," he said. Quiet. Deliberate. Each word placed carefully, like weight on ice he wasn't sure would hold. "Take him to your mother's this weekend. Stay there until I tell you otherwise." "You're not going to tell me why?" "No. Because you don't trust me with it, or because you're trying to keep me outside of whatever's coming." He said nothing. Which was its own answer. Willow picked up the laptop. She stood across the desk from him and looked at his face, the controlled jaw, the careful eyes, the specific stillness of a man holding himself at a distance from something he didn't want to be far from. "I've survived things without warning," she said quietly. "I'd survive it better with one." She left the room. He didn't call her back. The call came at 2 a.m. Alaric was already awake. He had been awake since Willow left the study 2 days earlier, sleeping in the fractured way he slept before something arrived that he had been tracking for too long, one eye always open, the body resting but never fully surrendering to it. Barrett's voice on the line was tight and low. "Federal vehicles. 4 of them. Dockside warehouse, the Callaway site. They have a warrant." Alaric was dressed and moving within 90 seconds. The warehouse on the eastern dock was the cleanest operation he ran, legitimate freight logistics, paper perfect, audited twice yearly by attorneys who charged enough that they stayed meticulous. Whatever Marcus had handed over on that drive, it wasn't real documentation. But forged evidence in federal hands was still evidence until proven otherwise, and the machinery of a raid moved faster than the machinery of a defense. He arrived to find the dock already cordoned, floodlights turning the waterfront white, federal agents moving through the warehouse in a systematic grid. Barrett was at the perimeter with 2 of their attorneys, already working the phones. Alaric stood at the cordon and watched, jaw set, calculating. He didn't see the second problem until it was almost too late. It wasn't the agents. It was the car parked in the shadow of the freight container on the south side of the lot, lights off, engine running, positioned at the one angle the federal vehicles didn't cover. The one angle where a man watching the cordon would have his back to the water and no clear sight line behind him. The training was old, but it didn't leave. He moved left without breaking his stride, putting the corner of a steel container between himself and the car, and the shot that followed hit the container's edge where his shoulder had been half a second earlier. The next 4 minutes were not the kind of thing that existed cleanly in memory afterward. They existed in fragments: the cold ground, Barrett's voice shouting from somewhere behind him, the sound of running feet on wet asphalt, another shot that went wide. Alaric moved through the freight yard on instinct and muscle memory and the particular clarity that comes when the body understands that thinking too slowly will kill it. When it was over, 1 man was detained and 2 had reached a boat at the south dock and gone. Barrett arrived at a run, took 1 look at Alaric crouched against the container wall, and exhaled something that wasn't quite a word. Alaric straightened. His left side burned where he'd hit the ground hard. Not a shot, he catalogued this efficiently, but a fall against a steel corner that would leave something cracked or badly bruised. He breathed through it. Marcus wasn't here, Barrett said. No. Alaric looked out at the black water where the boat had gone. He wouldn't be. He'd be somewhere with an alibi and a clean suit, waiting to hear whether it worked. He pulled out his phone. He didn't call his attorneys. He called Barrett back with 1 instruction, his voice completely level despite the pain moving through his ribs with every breath. Find out where Willow and Luca are. Right now. Don't stop until you confirm it. She was awake when Barrett called. Her mother's guest room was small and overwarm, and Willow had been lying in the dark for hours with the memory card in her hand, turning it over and over against her palm the way she turned problems she couldn't yet solve. Luca was asleep in the next room. She could hear him breathing through the thin wall. She was downstairs and outside before Barrett finished his second sentence, standing on her mother's front step in the cold with the door pulled behind her so no one inside could hear. Tell me what happened, she said. He told her. The warehouse. The federal raid. The shots fired. He gave it to her clean and fast, the way she had come to understand Barrett gave everything, no softening, no detour, because he had assessed her accurately enough to know she didn't need it. Is he hurt? Bruised ribs. He won't say how badly. Of course he won't. She pressed her free hand flat against the cold door behind her. Barrett. I have something. I've had it for 2 days. She stopped. I should have moved faster. Show me. He was at her mother's street within 40 minutes, which told her the call had already been traced to this neighborhood before he dialed. She didn't ask. She opened her laptop on the kitchen table while her mother slept upstairs, and laid out everything, the 4 frames, the timestamp, the staff manifest with the catering man's absence confirmed and annotated, and the written account she had prepared in order, documented the way flood damage got documented, because she had learned that precision was the only armor available to people without power. Barrett looked at the 3rd frame for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone, enlarged it, and looked longer. The drive, he said. Yes. This is from the gala. 8 days ago. He set the phone down and looked at her. Something had shifted in his face, not panic. Barrett didn't appear to have the architecture for panic, but a rapid, visible recalculation. Marcus submitted a transition proposal to 3 senior council members 4 days ago. Framed it as contingency planning. Alaric was aware of it and dismissed it. Willow looked at him. He wasn't planning contingency, Barrett said, and his voice had gone very quiet. He was counting votes. The raid was designed to make Alaric look compromised. Exposed. Too distracted to lead. He stood abruptly, phone already unlocking. If enough council members believe the organization is vulnerable tonight, Marcus calls the vote before Alaric can counter it. It's not an assassination. He was already moving toward the door. It's a removal. Tonight. Barrett. He stopped. Willow closed the laptop and picked up the memory card from the table. Take the original, she said. I kept copies in 3 places. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Something close to respect, though on Barrett it was difficult to distinguish from surprise. He took the card and walked out into the dark. She hadn't meant to go back to the estate. Barrett had been clear, stay at her mother's, stay with Luca, wait. She had intended to follow that instruction exactly. But Luca had woken at 6 asking for his sketchbook, the one he'd left on the desk in the garden room, and she had told herself it would take 20 minutes. In and out. Barrett and Alaric were across the city dealing with the council. The estate would be quiet. She understood her mistake the moment she turned into the drive. The gate was open. Not the staffed, monitored open of a normal morning. Open and unattended, the security booth empty, the camera above it dark. She stopped the car. Luca was already unbuckling. "Stay close to me," she said. Her voice came out calm, which surprised her. "Hold my hand and don't let go." They made it as far as the garden. Marcus was waiting near the elm trees, flanked by 2 men she didn't recognize. He looked exactly as he always looked, composed, well-dressed, the careful smile already arranged on his face. As though this were a scheduled meeting and they were the ones running late. "I only need 5 minutes," he said pleasantly. "Then you can take the boy and go wherever you'd like. I'll even have someone drive you." Luca pressed against her side. She put her hand on his shoulder and kept it there. "You're not supposed to be here," Willow said. "Neither are you." He tilted his head slightly. "That's what makes this convenient." She measured the distance to the gate. Too far, and the 2 men were already positioned to close it. Her phone was in her jacket pocket. She didn't reach for it because she didn't want Marcus to see what she was doing before she did it. She kept him talking. "The council vote didn't go the way you planned." Something moved behind Marcus's eyes. Not much, he was too disciplined for much, but enough. Temporary setback. Barrett had the photographs by midnight. The smile stayed, but the temperature behind it changed entirely. She had her phone out and the call connected before he took his first step forward, and she said Alaric's name once, clearly, and dropped it back into her pocket because she needed both hands free and she needed Luca behind her. Alaric came through the garden gate 40 seconds later. She would think about those 40 seconds for a long time afterward, what they cost him to cross the city with cracked ribs and what it meant that he came anyway. He looked at Marcus, then at Willow and Luca, and something moved across his face that she had no clean word for. Every controlled, constructed layer stripped back at once. His hands closed at his sides. She watched him breathe. Watched him choose. Then she heard Luca's voice from behind her, small and steady. "Mr. Alaric came," Luca said. "He always comes." Alaric's hands opened. He looked at Marcus with eyes that were cold and entirely decided, and spoke in a voice so quiet it was almost gentle. "Walk away. This is the only time I'll say it." A year changes things in ways you don't notice until you look back at where you were standing before. Luca's cardiologist used the word stable at the 6-month review and thriving at the 12-month, and Willow sat in the consultation room both times with her hands folded in her lap and her face composed until she reached the parking lot, where she allowed herself 60 seconds of crying against the steering wheel before driving home. She had learned to take joy in precise, measured doses. Old habit. It was taking time to unlearn. The photography exhibition opened in October in a small Williamsburg gallery that smelled of coffee from the roaster next door and old paper from the bookshop on the other side. 30 photographs on white brick walls. Her name on the door. The dream she had buried under medication bills and eviction notices and midnight cleaning shifts had been unearthed, not in the form she'd originally imagined, but in a form that was somehow more honest, shaped by everything she had survived rather than untouched by it. The photographs were of ordinary invisibility. A mother asleep on a subway car at dawn, lunch bag still gripped in both hands. A child playing alone in an empty lot, his shadow longer than he was. Hands counting coins at a pharmacy counter with the careful patience of someone who has done this calculation many times before. Alaric stood in the back of the gallery on opening night with a glass of water, watching her move through the crowd. She knew he was there. She could feel the specific quality of his attention, the way you feel sunlight on your back without turning around. He waited until the last guests had gone. The gallery was quiet, warm, the overhead lights dimmed to the soft level the curator used for closing. Willow was gathering her jacket from the back room when she came out to find him standing in the center of the space, looking at the photograph she had placed at the end of the exhibition. It was the one she had never shown him. Taken 6 months after the wedding, in the estate garden on a morning she had been testing a new lens. He was sitting at the outdoor table with Luca's drawings spread in front of him, looking at them one by one, entirely unaware of her. The light was coming through the elms at a low angle, catching the edge of his jaw, and his face held the expression she had since learned to recognize. Not calm. Peace. He stood looking at it for a long time. Then he turned, and his expression was the most open she had ever seen it, every constructed layer gone, nothing between her and whatever was actually there. He crossed the room and dropped to one knee. No box this time. Only his hands, open, held toward her. And his voice, low and slightly unsteady at the end, which on Alaric Thorne meant everything. Stay, he said. Not because you need to. Because you choose to. Willow looked at him kneeling on the gallery floor, the most feared man she had ever met, reduced and elevated at once to simply a man asking a question he didn't know the answer to. She thought of rock bottom. Of gravel against her cheek in a parking lot. Of a boy counting to 100 3 times. Of everything you could build on a foundation, if you were brave enough to stop falling first. Yes, she said. The story ends here, but what it leaves behind is this. A boy who was once counting to 100 in a wedding garden, alone and terrified, now runs through a house with a garden and a swing on the back porch, his heart, the one that was never supposed to be strong enough, steady and sure inside his chest. He calls Alaric Dad the way he says every important word, without ceremony, without hesitation, as though it were always true and the world simply took time catching up. A woman who once held a wall to stay standing now holds a camera, and the work she makes from that camera hangs on gallery walls and stops strangers in their tracks and makes them look, really look, at the people they walk past every day without seeing. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. She made that memory into something that mattered. And a man who spent 20 years believing the only protection he could offer the people he loved was fear, that man kneels in a gallery on a Tuesday night and asks a single question with open hands, and discovers that the most powerful thing he has ever done required no weapon, no network, no name spoken in a room that goes quiet. It only required the willingness to stay. None of them were saved by circumstance. The hospital didn't save Willow. The estate didn't save Luca. The evidence Willow photographed in the dark didn't save Alaric from the version of himself he feared most. What saved them was smaller and harder and more ordinary than any of that. It was one person stopping when everyone else walked past. It was a mother choosing her child over herself, again and again, until her body gave out and someone finally noticed. It was a man hearing a child's voice in the moment before he became his father, and choosing differently. Rock bottom is only the end if you stay there. If you are watching this from somewhere that feels like a parking lot at dusk, if you are the one counting to 100, waiting for someone who isn't coming, then let this be the thing you take with you tonight. You are allowed to accept the door when it opens. You are allowed to trust again after trust has cost you everything. You are allowed to build something new on the wreckage of what fell apart, and what you build there can be more solid, more true, more entirely yours than anything you lost. Piper had trembling hands and a daughter she loved beyond reason. Willow had a camera and a boy with a fragile heart. It was already everything. If this story reached something in you, if it reminded you of your own parking lot or your own counted hundreds, leave a word below. We read every one. And we'll see you in the next story.